Hello, and welcome to the Frontend UI React Client Quick Start video. In this video, we'll create a React-based Frontend UI application, or Frontend Client as we call it. We'll cover the following topics: Frontend UI Overview, generating a starter application, adding components, using services, and configuring security. Let us say a few words about what the Frontend UI is, how it's different from generic UI, and how you should choose between them. Generic UI is part of the Web Client block, which is a web application running on a Java servlet container. First, it's based on Java and doesn't require expertise in front-end specific technologies such as JavaScript, CSS, or HTML. Second, it keeps the state at the back end, which means seamless integration with business logic and data model. Third, it ensures that an application is highly secured, as there's no need to expose any externally available endpoints. And lastly, it provides a lot of components that can be useful in a business application. These components are easy to use and provide a simple data binding mechanism. These features make generic UI an ideal option for backend developers. However, there are some natural limitations. First, making significant layout customizations and supporting responsive UI can be a complicated task. Secondly, UI sessions cannot be replicated, which can lead to scalability issues. Third, the look and feel may appear too enterprisey for a user. Fourth, there is no offline mode. And lastly, front-end developers are likely to be unfamiliar with the technologies used by generic UI. To summarize, generic UI is a perfect fit for internal or back-office users and is an ideal tool for back-end developers. However, if there's a need to provide a customer-facing user interface available for a crowd of external users, it may require a higher level of customizability and high load tolerance. In that case, you might prefer Frontend UI. It uses different technologies that are more familiar to front-end developers and enables easy integration of UI libraries and components from the vast JavaScript ecosystem. However, it requires better knowledge of modern front-end stack. Frontend UI is a client-side application. It communicates with the middleware using REST API. There are several varieties of front-end clients, so you can choose one that best serves your needs. For example, you can have a React-based application executed in the web browser, or a mobile application based on React Native. In this video, we'll focus on React Client. Let's have a short overview of the tools and libraries that you can use in order to build your front-end client. The front-end generator is a scaffolding tool that can be used to speed up the process of developing a front-end client. It can generate a starter application and add the pieces you need, such as components to view and edit entities. There are two component and utility libraries: CUBA React Core, which is responsible for core functionalities such as working with CUBA entities, and CUBA React UI, which contains the UI components. The CUBA REST.js library handles the low-level interactions with the REST API. CUBA React Core uses it under the hood. We'll not deal with it directly in this video, but it can be useful when you need additional flexibility or want to create a client using a framework that is not available out of the box, such as Vue or Angular. TypeScript SDK is generated by the front-end generator and is a TypeScript representation of a project's entities, views, and facades to access REST services. It's part of any generated front-end client. You can also use it to develop a front-end client based on your favorite framework. Let's create our first front-end client using CUBA Studio. Select CUBA View in the Project Tool window. Right-click on Project and select Manage Modules, then Create Front module. Choose the React module preset. Now that we've successfully generated a front-end client, let's run it. You can do it from the CUBA menu by choosing Run Application Server. This will launch both back-end and front-end applications. Both applications will be served by Tomcat. Alternatively, the front-end application can be served from a development server. In this case, you'll have hot reload, in which changes to the code will be immediately reflected in the browser. We recommend this approach during development. To run the front-end client on a development server, execute the Start script in the generated project. Before we can log into our application, we need to set up REST permissions for our user. By default, no users, not even admin, have these permissions. Log into your CUBA application and go to Administration, Users. Select Admin User and click Edit. Add a role. Create a new role as shown. Don't worry if it doesn't make sense to you yet, as we'll cover it in more detail later in this video. Now we can log in to our application. Let's explore the generated project. This is the entry point of the application. This is the router configuration. We use the well-known React Router library. Speaking of libraries, React Client uses Ant Design as its UI kit, MobX for reactive state management, and React INTL for internationalization. The CUBA folder contains the TypeScript SDK. It has project entities, which include base entities coming from the framework and add-ons, project enums, and queries and REST services. The app folder contains your components. For now, there isn't much inside. Let's add some components. In the CUBA view of the Project Tool window, expand the data model and right-click on an entity class. Select New Front-End Component. We can choose between several component templates: a blank component, read-only entity cards, or an entity management template that allows us to create, edit, or delete entities. Let's use the last one. Let's choose the views that our list and editor components will use. Also, let's choose the list type, which shows what our list of entities will look like. Let's choose Table. Now let's go back to the browser. As you can see, a new menu item has appeared. Let's click it. This is the entity table that we've just generated. Let's try to edit an entity. This is the entity editor component. Let's try to change something. The entity has been updated successfully. In addition to working with entities, you might want to be able to execute service methods. In our example application, we have a service that allows managing a list of favorite cars. It has an Add Favorite method that allows you to add the car to the list of favorite cars, and a Get Favorites method that returns the list. Let's use these methods, but instead of using something like fetch to manually call the REST endpoints, we'll use the power of our TypeScript SDK. TypeScript SDK contains a file called services.ts, which exports the REST services object. We just need to import it to our component and call a corresponding method. Let's show how to do that. Let's open the car list component that we generated before and add a button that'll mark the car as a favorite. Also, we'll add a button that'll show the favorite cars. Now let's add the code that'll be invoked when the buttons are clicked. We import the REST services object and call a method. We'll need to pass the CUBA app instance to this method. CUBA app is coming from the CUBA REST.js library, and it allows calling REST API methods. We can obtain it by using the getCubaRest function from the CUBA React core library. The method provided by REST services will return a function that'll call the REST API endpoint. We'll need to pass the parameters expected by our service method. Let's test this code. There are other things that you can do using Frontend UI libraries and REST API, such as executing predefined JPQL queries, getting user permissions, uploading and downloading files, and so on. Check the Frontend UI and REST API manuals at our website to learn more. Now, let's discuss the final topic. Previously, we were logging into our application under the admin account, which is not suitable for production. Let's create a role that'll have only the necessary permissions. Log in to your CUBA application. Go to Administration, Roles. Click Create. Enter the name of the role. Choose Security Scope. Security scopes allow users to have different permissions depending on what client technology they're using to access the application. In our case, we need to select REST. Now go to the Specific tab and allow using the REST API. If you want your user to be able to upload files, allow the corresponding permission as well. Now users who have this role will be able to log in to our front-end client, but they still won't be able to interact with any entities. So let's fix that. Go to the Entities tab and allow write access to our entities. Then go to the Attributes tab and give permissions to read and write the attributes. Click Save and Close. Finally, let's create a user and assign a role. Go to Administration, Users. Click Create. Enter the login and password, and add a role that we've just created. Click OK. Now, let's log into the front-end client as a user we've just created. As you can see, now we only view the attributes that we've allowed to be read. Let's try to edit an entity. As you see, the attributes that we marked as read-only are not allowed to be edited. Configuring security is extremely important and should not be taken lightly. Remember that if a user has permission to edit a certain entity, that user can do so even if you don't provide an editor component by sending an HTTP request, and that could create a security breach. In this video, we've learned how to generate a starter client and add some components to it. Of course, you're not limited to generated components. You might want to create some components manually, as well as to reuse some of the components provided by our libraries or some other library. We've also learned how to use services and configure security, and this should be enough to get started. For more information, check the Frontend UI manual on our website. Thank you for watching, and happy coding!